The quarterfinals await England after a historic win at the Azteca, a win that will go down in English football history. However, as a wise man once said, job's not done, and Norway in the quarterfinals could be the greatest test that Thomas Tuchel has faced as the England manager. Haaland's ruthless goal scoring, Nyland's super moments, and the Norwegian press will all test England's resolve. But they've came through adversity before. I'm Jacob Horsfall, FourFourTwo's resident tactician, and this is how England can beat Norway.
It's England's King Kane who strikes again.
England's tournament has been one of trials and tribulations, failing to break down Ghana, going 1-0 down to DR Congo, and going down to 10 men against Mexico. But Tuchel's side have always found a way and progressed through the gears as the tournament has gone on. The team that faced Mexico exemplified England's development. There were so many star performances, but as a unit who lost 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 and then had to drop into a 5-3-1 and see out a well-fought win, England managed that game perfectly. Mexico pressed England really aggressively early doors. They matched man-to-man marking with zonal spacing to usher England wide and then block their access into Jude, Rice and Anderson by collapsing across. However, England was savvy enough to play over the press to their relentless runners. Anthony Gordon's dribble map showed majority of his dribbles coming in the wide areas on the edge of the box because that's where he was receiving the ball. England managed the Azteca atmosphere and more importantly Mexico's press in the first 15 or 20 minutes by simply playing over it. A similar plan took place against DR Congo. Both England wingers stayed high for large portions of the game. The plan was always to get those wingers in space and attacking open space that they can leg it into, which is why when you look at the 4 wingers that Thomas Tuchel took with him to this World Cup, you see they've all got relatively similar qualities. They can all thrive in those big space moments. Now that's important looking towards the Norway game because Norway's defence and midfield are so aggressive. You see here, they instantly look to jump onto Vinicius Jr. and engage with them even though they've only got minimal players back. But the reason for that is that these defenders mistime their jump to join the counter press. So that means that they take that risk 1v1 with Vinny Jr. who, more often than not will beat his man, and he does so, and then finds Endrick running through on goal in a 1v1. Which, if you know anything about England and England under Thomas Tuchel, those moments that Brazil got in behind the Norway defence should fill you with a lot of confidence. This is a situation that shows some similarities to Endrick's chance against Norway because you see Gordon and Kane engage and isolate 2 Mexican players, which creates small space for the ball to be played into, and because of England's physical excellence, they can exploit that space, which is something they'll need to make the most of against Norway. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗧 sits 7th in the World Cup for clearances per 90 at the time of recording. The Norway defence want to engage with the first contact, but to do that they obviously leave a little bit of space. However, for England to exploit that space, they've got to forfeit some of their own space in the defensive half, and that could be a problem. Erling Haaland is by far and away England's biggest worry. Now that's not a discredit to the other Norway players, but Haaland has scored in every single World Cup game that he's played in at this tournament. And let's be honest, England's defence hasn't been watertight at this tournament. So, can they stop the greatest goal scorer, the greatest finisher on the planet? Well, with Norway, almost everything comes central. Martin Odegaard gets on the ball and combines with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 and Berg to pull the opposition narrow before playing wide so they can put balls into the box early for Erling Haaland. Haaland is one of the best box movers to ever grace the game. I can't think of many players in my lifetime that find space like he does. He could find space in a mosh pit at Harry Styles concert. Yeah. Is that good? You see here, as the Norway winger beats his man, Haaland is walking toward the box. As Gabriel takes his last scan, Haaland is actually still walking, which lulls the Brazil defender into a false sense of security before the Norway number 9 darts across his marker as the ball is halfway in the air towards him. The intelligence of Erling Haaland's movement is terrifying, especially when you consider the way that you expect England to approach this game. Norway have averaged the least possession of all the teams left in the competition. Their real threats has come in transition with Nusa and Haaland all looking to burst in behind and exploit any space on a counter-attack. On the flip side, England have been susceptible to putting pretty much everyone in the opposition's half. We see here the two centre-halves are involved in pinning 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 inside their own box. But England are yet to do that against a centre-forward who you expect to bury 9 out of 10 chances, someone who could get the ball on the halfway line and probably score by the time he reaches the goal. Which leads me to the biggest worry I have, and that is that Norway get an early goal, England are pressuring them at 1-0 down, and Haaland finds himself on the halfway line behind both the England centre-halves, a ball gets sent long, and he's running down 1v1 with 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. Erling Haaland in a 1v1 is like death and taxes. He feels pretty inevitable. I mean, his XG at this tournament is the most out of any player, and yet he's still considerably overperformed it. And what is worse about this Norway team when you're looking at it from an England perspective is that you don't just have to worry about Haaland and his goals and his movement to put your centre-halves all over the shop, but you've also got to worry about being too focused on Erling Haaland's presence. A lot of teams have been dragged into doubling up on Haaland, which means both centre-halves are constantly occupied. But Norway have multiple players who can hurt you, so if you get too dragged into marking Haaland, you end up leaving space for the other Norway players to come into and, well, punish you. Because of Haaland making a run into the box here, 2 Brazil defenders were dragged narrow and deep, leaving the space for the cutback to Berg. And that is one of the 1,000 worries I have going into this game. It's not just about Erling Haaland, because yes, you can mark him out the game, you can make sure he doesn't get a touch, but if you don't show the respect that the rest of the Norway team deserve, well, they can also punish you. So how does Tuchel go about managing the greatest goal scorer on planet Earth, but also not allowing England to get too dragged into a big battle just against Erling Haaland?
England knock out the co-hosts in their own...
Video aside for a second, here's a hypothetical question for you. Imagine you're on your holidays for the World Cup, or you're travelling for work and can't get your World Cup fix. You've got your TV licence sorted so that you can watch the BBC when you're at home in the UK, but not when you're abroad. So what do you do? Well, our office friends here at Tom's Guide have the answer, because they've tried out a wide range of VPNs, and NordVPN stands out as a strong option. Fast, reliable, and it comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee, enough to cover the entirety of the World Cup tournament. So that means you can try it risk-free. The best bit? Well, for all FourFourTwo viewers, there's also an exclusive offer available. All you've got to do is head down to the description and click the link to find out more. But for now, let's get back to this video. Thomas Tuchel's plan probably comes across as relatively simple. In theory, the Norway wingers need to be stamped out the game, but Haaland also can't be isolated 1v1. Now, that's much easier said than done, and funnily enough, I believe that England's midfield are the ones who can help England win this game. The star performers of this tournament have came from that midfield, and they're going to have to step up once again in another massive game for England. If England revert back to that makeshift back five that we saw against Mexico in those deep defensive states, it can help manage space around the box. Here we see it's 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, but against 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, we saw Anderson dropping deep, which allows the fullbacks and wingers to double up on wide players and force crosses from unfavourable positions, which I think will help England more than anything else. If they can still have a spare man in the box to allow for any runners to be tracked, but also stop the service into Haaland by blocking out those wingers, then they make it so that Haaland has to create his own chances, which, as we know, probably isn't his strength. Although he's still scary when he's creating his own chances, to be fair. On the flip side of that though, this England team have been direct and electrifying in possession at points of this tournament, and they need to maintain that going in against a very, very solid Norway team. Rice's drive and run here is something that we need to see against Norway, because his speed to drive forward pulls Mexico over to that side of the pitch, leaving 𝗘𝗫𝗓𝗏 on the underloaded side with space to attack. By the time Saka crosses the ball, Jude is free to crash the box and head the ball pretty much unchallenged. Norway constantly looking to counter-press means that they also play with a high line, and if you can have those marauding runs from 𝗘𝗫𝗓𝗏𝗏, from Declan Rice, then Norway will be dragged out and space between the lines for deep runs to attack open up, something that Gordon, Bellingham and O'Reilly will be grinning ear to ear at the thought of. Because of how aggressive this Norway team can be out of possession and how physical they really want to be, they want to impose themselves, I think that almost plays into England's hands more than it has with any other team. Against Croatia, we saw how quickly England went from passive build-up to dangerous attack when Croatia left space on the back line to press England. We saw the same against Mexico, as Mexico looked to, at points, bomb players on to press this England team, especially early doors. Now, Norway, compared to a Croatia and Mexico, are a level above on a quality level, but that type of plan, that type of moment, well, those two games have shown England at their attacking best, and I expect the same against this Norway side. Yes, this Norway team is someone who you cannot overlook, and it's not just Haaland, it's 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, it's 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏, it's 𝗕𝗫𝗫𝗧𝗏, it's the centre-halves as well, and a very, very good shot stopper in goal. And don't get me wrong, this game is going to be a huge test. It's the first game of this World Cup where I wonder if England can actually get the job done. But this isn't the same England of the past. This is a different level. This is a different team. They rise to the big occasions, and it doesn't get much bigger than coming up against the best striker on the planet in a quarter-final of the World Cup, with revenge against Argentina potentially waiting in the semi-final. It's going to be an incredibly tough game, and if you have got any expectation for England, please let me know in the comments. Can we get the job done? I've been Jacob Horsfall. This has been 442, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.